Hello, dobar dan, and welcome to today's short online exchange titled Nature Conservation, the Ultimate Utopia. I'm Katarina Žakar, and with me I welcome colleague Diana Cetaković-Biagi from Tsipras, Slovenia, who will help me with some technical issues of today's webinar. This webinar is organized as a part of Via Alpina Visit Utopia project, which is co-founded by Erasmus+. It is not only in these December days. For nature lovers, it is always the right time to encourage one another by sharing the wisdom of experience and to renew the momentum for our work. Therefore, I'm really happy that Jernej decided to join us for today's webinar. For those who don't know him yet, Jernej Stritih is the head of Stritih Sustainable Development Consulting and a leading Slovenian expert in sustainable development with 35 years of experience in the national and international policy context. He has managed various institutions, including the Slovenian Government Office of Climate Change and the Regional Environmental Center for Central and Eastern Europe. He has coordinated several donor and EU-funded technical cooperation projects addressing climate change, nature conservation, institution building, and stakeholder engagement. He is also a trailblazer in the implementation and the financial participatory approach in the Caucasus and has conducted PPA capacity building in Ethiopia and Djibouti. A scout, nature lover, he uses his spare time for kayaking, mountaineering, mountain biking, and skiing. If this wouldn't, above all, he is also a certified whitewater kayaking and alpinism instructor. Jernej, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. As I said, it's my pleasure, and I think you're expecting a bit much of today, but I hope I can contribute what I can.
I'm positive about that. As we heard, I'm really happy that we have so many participants already, and I welcome you all to today exchange as well. Jernej, as I briefly described in the beginning, your professional path is rich, diverse, and dynamic. How would you describe the path that led you to nature conservation? And if you could provide us with a short overview of your professional journey.
Yeah, maybe what brought me to nature conservation is my family background. I grew up in Ljubljana, but my parents are from the Slovenian mountains. So I'm one of those urban kids who also had a positive relationship to the countryside and the mountains, and we did mountaineering in the family, and then I got into scouting, then a bit later into climbing, studied forestry. So basically I studied in the 80s, and I was most active as volunteer in the scouts in the 80s, and then we were facing some problems which are no longer a problem, but some that are still. That was acid rain, forest dieback, a lot of garbage in the nature in Slovenia. Rivers were very polluted. And then during my studies, I studied with Professor Dušan Mlinšek, who was one of the leading environmentalists and leading close to nature foresters globally, basically. So that had a big influence. I also started working with Dušan Plut, who was the leader of the green movement in Slovenia in the 80s and early 90s, more on the civil society activism part. But I also studied quite a lot, and one important influence on me was Gregory Bateson. He was one of the biologists and anthropologists who basically tried to connect the human side and the nature side of the discussion through the cybernetics, through better understanding of working of ecosystems and social ecological systems, as they're called today. Yeah, so this was my background, and then the career started with the research work in the forest faculty, working with virgin forests in Slovenia, and then what really shaped my future was the transition in Central and Eastern Europe. I mean, with 89, 90, now we celebrate the fall of Berlin Wall and all these changes. Slovenia went for democratization and independence. And being just finished the university, then I was basically on this wave and got working for the Slovenian government already in 1990 with friends from Scouts. We started the first private consultancy in late 89, and my first CIPRA conference was in 1990, which also provided quite a strong influence, and I basically got involved in the CIPRA network from then on, and this helped me a lot also in my future. I could go on and on, but that's you explained some of the things also. Yeah.
You prepared some picture, I mean, some materials as well, that we don't only look at each other in the eyes. So maybe you can share that
Okay.
with us as well.
Maybe I prepared some pictures from my young years and connected to the later ones.
Mm-hmm.
This is scouting. I was basically part of a scout group in Ljubljana, which was already during the communist times quite advanced in terms of working with troubled kids and providing advanced methods of education. And then in the last decade, I was the chief scout of Slovenia for a while. Then I'll remove this.
Do you maybe remember a moment or experience when you realized that nature not only inspires you, but also calls you to protect it?
Yeah, probably that was during the university. Before that, I was mainly motivated for nature in terms of. Sorry?
No, I will mute one of the participants.
Okay. Yeah, I was in when I gained basically deeper understanding of the relationship of people and nature. One important part was that in Scouts we were always asked to do the cleaning of garbage or the litter in the towns every spring. Like this is educational for the children. And then I thought it's not educational to make people clean up after the grown-ups. And what we started doing was mapping the dump sites and publishing them and giving them to the information to the relevant authorities, and that was part of the effort between the 80s and 90s in Slovenia then to start universal waste collection, and now Slovenia is quite clean compared to many other countries. And then on the other hand, yeah, there was the study of close to nature forestry, ecosystem science, and so on. So I got kind of motivated for that. So these are some of the picture from my young years, and we were in climbing. We were also that was the time when free climbing started all over Europe, and there was this joke slide from where the locals wrote, "God forgive them, they don't know what they're doing." So with my forestry friends, we went climbing and we took a picture under that. And the later picture is from my highest mountain, Huayna Potosí in Bolivia, together with my kids in 2007. And then when I got too heavy for climbing, I started kayaking because it's more forgiving. And I had quite a tough way to learn to kayak on Socha River, but yeah, later I also get certification for instructor, and I've done some involved this also in development cooperation, teaching, for example, young people in Montenegro, which is a great kayaking destination, so that they can be the guides and they can organize things, and they are very active in that today. So these are some pictures from my young years.
Thank you. Could you share, please, what personal values have guided you in making key decisions in your career?
I mean, one thing is the community relations. I mean, believing that community is important, that you have to contribute to the community. And the other one maybe would be professionalism. I think I mean, you have these two approaches to especially environmental and nature activism, where somehow everybody expects that we should do this activist work for improving the world as volunteers or sacrificing ourselves. But I think what we realized with these groups where we were doing environmental activism in Scouts, we soon realized that this volunteer work has some scope, but if you want to do it sustainably also for yourself, you have to do it as a profession, as a trade, and learn how to do it sustainably, also take care of yourself, and also why, if everybody else is paid well, why shouldn't environmentalists be paid well? But on the other hand, also to understand, as I said, community values, you can also only do this work professionally if you serve somebody, if you serve the community, if you bring an added value to the community, or to the, let's say, country, or to the humanity, if you like.
Mm. With your answer, you already answered perhaps as well one of the questions of the participants, namely, is, in your opinion, nature conservation a way of life or a professional field?
It's a professional field. I mean, there is a lot of knowledge, skills, way of working, which have been accumulated, and it's a huge global community. If you go to IUCN's website, you will find very professional guidelines for all sorts of aspects of nature conservation. But at the same time, it's also a way of life, I think. I haven't met many conservationists who are not engaged in some kind of outdoor activities, or who are not working in some other way in the community work. So so it's a, you could say it's a vocation, it's a mission. It's both the kind of, you have to believe in it, but then you have to do it professionally.
What would you say, which challenges in nature conservation have had the greatest impact on your career? And sub-question, how did you tackle them?
One thing we kind of came across very early was this different understanding in the nature conservation profession about the role of local communities, or the people, the landowners, the farmers, the people depending on the land, where some see them as the main enemy, as the main threat to the conservation. The other view is that they can be the greatest friend, and they are the ones who actually shaped the landscape, the existing ecosystems over hundreds of years or even millennia, and we should work with them. And I mean, I've been involved in a number of projects since early 90s, where we're trying to combine rural development and nature conservation and basically empower local communities to contribute to nature conservation or take over the nature conservation. And this has basically then led to my last 10 years of work in the Caucasus, where I'm leading German-funded WWF projects to support community conservation, contractual community conservation in the Caucasus. So I think that's kind of the biggest discussion we've always had. And in Slovenia, we had this in the early 90s. We helped the Trenta cooperative to establish their hydropower plant in Krajcarca, which was quite controversial. And it started with the leadership of Maria Zupancic-Vičar, who was then director of the national park. Later, we worked a lot with the Logarska Dolina protected landscape, which was a private initiative, and a number of other things. But then also internationally, that's been kind of the focus of my work.
Working with stakeholders is an important aspect of your work, and if we are honest, it's an important aspect of everyone's work, perhaps. What can you tell us about that? What more? In sense of what have you learned about working with people?
Well, one thing I often say is that, you go into the nature conservation or the environmental profession, especially nature conservation, to spend time in nature and work in mountains and forests or on rivers. But then you end up most of the time behind the desk and talking to people. And I mean, protecting nature or nature conservation is not about, I mean, maybe sometimes small interventions in nature itself, but it's mainly about working with people. What I have learned, and maybe, this is also a good example, is this project we're doing now in the Caucasus. Maybe I can share some more pictures from that. I'm sorry. I have to restart the presentation. Just a moment. Yeah, what we have. Come on. What I mean, the purpose of that project is to. How does this work? No. Sorry, Murphy's Law of presentations. The purpose of the project is to secure sustainable land use, which favors nature conservation outside of the protected areas. And we are basically preparing local communities to sign 10-year nature conservation contracts with the WWF, with World Wildlife Fund, in order to protect the nature. And we basically were able, I mean, when we started with this, everybody in the capitals, like ministries, seasoned professionals said, yeah, you cannot work with the villages. They are uneducated, they will cheat you, they will, they will lie to you, they will just want to take the money and do nothing. But then we used kind of an approach which shows the proper respect to the local communities. It's called the financial participatory approach, where we don't go with experts to the villages and try to tell them what they're doing wrong and how they should improve things, but we are organizing contests among the villagers or the village groups and so on to reward basically the best practices, the good ideas, also the indigenous or this old local information about nature, because local people always know more about their land and about their nature than even the best expert from outside. And through that, we were able to basically build now about 30 partnerships in 3 countries, in Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan. And for example, one of the success stories this year has been that there used to be a small population of Persian leopards between Iran, Azerbaijan, and Armenia in this Nakhichevan area. There were about 5 of them. And then because we supported local people to increase the number of wild goats in the mountains and wild sheep, this number of leopards increased because they had enough food. And one of the male leopards, his name is Aren, he crossed from Azerbaijan to Armenia. You know that Armenia and Azerbaijan used to be in conflict, so there are a lot of minefields. This leopard lost a foot on one of the minefields, but survived and could thrive on this. And then later he appeared like 150 kilometers north in another conservation area where we were working with the local community. And finally in Armenia, and then finally in this year he showed up in Georgia in a national park, looking at an enclosure where they're trying to reintroduce red deer into the wild. So this is really rewarding, and I can also tell you that the local people are extremely proud of this achievement. That they see that they could really improve the nature situation in their own land, in their own countryside, and that there are more wild animals they can see, and that this also gives a future to them and their children.
Another question of the participants was how to encourage stakeholders in the local community to imply sustainable changes. Could you tell us more? I mean, could you provide some more examples or some nice stories regarding that?
Yeah, well, I think the most important is that you really have to understand what the local communities need and want, and listen to them, and empower them to take responsibility for their own development. I don't think anybody from outside can just come and tell local communities what to do. And maybe an example would be from Tsipra. In 91, the Alpine Convention was signed, which was the big achievement of the early decades of Tsipra International, pushing for an Alpine Convention. But then the question in Tsipra became what to do next. What do we fight for? And then many people did some thinking. I was part of that. And then we came up with the idea, okay, let's work with the local communities on their sustainable development, but not from this teaching or supervising point of view, but from empowerment point of view. And that's how we started this network of local communities alliance in the Alps, which is now also more than 20 years old, and has basically carried this positive sustainable development vision in the Alps, and shared this vision among them, shared good practices among them, and I think that's how it works, and it should work.
Jernej, are you an advocate of rapid change?
I think rapid change can happen when there is general restructuring going on. I mean, we saw that around year 1990 with the transition in Central and Eastern Europe. Then everything changed very quickly, and everything was possible. Otherwise, I mean, what is happening now may be also approaching such a thing, which may actually not be positive for nature conservation and for environmental policy, because everybody's focusing on security and conflicts now. But otherwise, I think that if you look into history, revolutions usually cause more problems than the positive change they make. So I'm more in favor of kind of consensus-based change, which is step by step and which is based on more bottom-up approach, let's say.
How do you see the current challenges that impact the wider field of nature protection and nature conservation? Or which ones would you highlight as key issues that needs to be addressed?
Well, one big one now that I'm also dealing quite a lot with is the link between biodiversity and climate change. I see that, sometimes you see this kind of competition between different topics of the environmental agenda. So what is more important, plastic in the oceans or protecting more areas or reducing carbon emissions and so on. But I think what we need to do is make sure that these things are seen in an integrated way and that we approach them in such a way that that we can do more, achieve more objectives with one action, let's say. And we have, for example, in Slovenia and other Alpine countries, we have the tradition of close to nature forest management, where you provide economic benefits of producing timber. At the same time, you preserve biodiversity in the forest and a naturally functioning ecosystem. Now, the term which is used are nature-based solutions, which could be used much more, and where you can actually do biodiversity together or nature conservation together with climate adaptation, emission reduction, or cleaning up the areas. Obviously, also the new technologies are quite helpful in many ways, but it's. I think that's a big topic, and the other one maybe is this misunderstanding about the conflict between economy and environment. There is this stereotype, let's say, that environmental management or nature conservation is expensive, and that it's if the country is in economic trouble, then it should stop doing environment. And the latest case is this weakening of the rules about electric cars in European Union, which is supposed to help European car industry, but in reality it will just further weaken the European car industry in comparison, in competition with China, where they are now the leading producers of electric cars and are overtaking us very, very quickly. So that's basically already for 10, 20 years, basically environmental improvement, including nature conservation, brings economic benefits. It's a economically beneficial thing. I mean, it improves livelihoods, it provides jobs, it creates added value. I mean, if you have clean water, if you have stable ecosystems, ecosystem services of different kinds provided by nature, they are much more valuable than the costs associated with nature conservation.
How would you comment on the prospects for founding major conservation programs in the future?
Well, it's now after this Kunming Montreal target of 30% of the land, sea, and waters being protected or covered with other effective area-based conservation measures, I see quite a big push, at least in the countries where I'm working and that I know of, that to really achieve this high coverage with nature conservation of some kind. And maybe we can also say here that Slovenia, has been basically the first EU country that has more than 30% of the territory under some kind of conservation, including the Natura 2000 network that we did. We should have more waters under conservation, that's for sure. But so I see that there is quite a big push going on. But on the other hand, we have this security first logic now coming up in the politics, weakening of the nature legislation in the European Union, even worse, weakening in the United States, abandonment of development cooperation projects on this. So it's a bit precarious, but so on one hand, it has never been so good for nature conservation. There have been so many protected areas, so many people working on this, but there is also this backlash at the moment, which will have to survive somehow.
During maybe now is the time to ask you about the magic wand. So what we are often facing these headaches, right? We would like to help the nature, preserve it, or empower locals, do something when they're facing the wall again and again. Working in the field of nature conservation, nature protection is not always easy. So what is your effective remedy for headaches?
I wanted to share another picture, which will be, I don't know who can understand the reference. It's not easy working for nature conservation, and there is no magic wand. These pictures are from this Akira Kurosawa's movie Seven Samurais, and I often feel a bit like those guys. If you know the story of the film, it's basically about the group of samurais without masters, so-called ronin, who are asked by a village to protect them from the robbers, or from a group of villains who were attacking the village and robbing them of their possessions. And basically it's about the mission, what is your purpose, what you're doing, and then it's about the skills and about the professionalism of doing what you're doing. So once you commit to something, you have to do it in the best possible way, but it is often quite painful in the process. It's not it's not always like this beautiful paradise picture, walking in beautiful nature and meeting nice people and having nice discussions. There is a lot of frustration, but then when you, what I often do is look back a few years to what I was doing, I don't know, 5-10 years ago, and that there were actually quite a lot of successful things, but there were also failures. So you have to be able to accept failure and sacrifice if you are in this, but that's basically part of the professionalism.
What would you expose as one of the achievements, one of the biggest or biggest achievements, notable achievements?
Yes, I mean, I was involved in the early 90s in a number of things in Slovenia. With the World Bank project, we established the Eco Fund, which is still the very successful mechanism to support investment into environmental technology. I was part of the Slovenian forest law in '93, which basically codified the close to nature for forest management in Slovenia and resolved the conflict between the state and the forest owners. Most forest in Slovenia is privately owned, so we transformed the forest service, or we established a public forest service, whose job it is to serve both the public interest and the forest owner in their work. So these are some really good things. There have been also some failures, like 20 years ago with Marieta Keršić-Cvetel and Maria Zupancic, we were fighting to introduce more community-friendly provisions into the law on the Slovenian National Park, on the Triglav National Park, and we were not successful with that. This classic adversarial attitude prevailed in the final law. So, yeah.
Yeah, you have as well experience shaping nature conservation legislation. How would you describe this experience? And what advice would you give to individuals who are also striving for the effective implementation or amendment of laws governing nature conservation?
Yeah, the legislation is always a tricky thing, because there are basically, it's about building a social consensus or political consensus. So you have to start by setting your expectations correctly, not to have too many or too high expectations that you can achieve anything or everything. And then what is important is that you recognize who are the stakeholders. Many times the policy changes are more about personal relations or mutual respect than about the substance. And I think what is also very important is fact-based policy making, so that you really try to focus on what's going on in the area, what are the really good solutions, what are the reasons, what is the justification for change. That it's not just, oh, because I think something should be changed, you go for this kind of change. But as I said before about this transition in the early 90s, changes of law are rare and far between, and basically it's a serious endeavor, and it has to be done very seriously and carefully, not to basically lose a lot of time campaigning for something which is then where you're not successful in the end.
Thank you. I invite the participants as well to maybe briefly ask a question to Jernej. If you don't want to ask it yourself, and you have your written questions, and I can ask him. Just please raise your hand. Maya Kugoshek is asking, you started a lot of initiatives. Do you have any practical tips how to start them?
I don't know. I mean, basically, you have to start things that you really believe in and where you think it's going to be easy. And then it's not so easy in the end. But at the start, it's and then it's about teamwork. It's about the group of people you work with, and that you can have a kind of a shared vision, shared concept, shared ideas.
What about energy management?
Energy management, I'm not so good at that. Well, if you believe in something, it gives you motivation, but then you have to take care that you don't burn out. And that also reverts back to the professionalism. So, as opposed to the Hollywood movies where, a main hero with a huge motivation and unbelievable energy over 2 days saves the world, the reality is not like that. So you have to as we say, like in kayaking or in mountain rescue, if you have to if you want to help the others, first you have to be safe and you have to be capable. So you have to take care of your own life, family life, personal life, health, nutrition, recreation, and so on. If you don't want to do a lot of work and not promise the impossible. I've been in quite a few situations where we were working weekends and overnight and these kind of things. This happens sometimes, but you have to make sure that it's on a manageable level.
I liked as well your story, or how do you say, the motto regarding whitewater kayaking. I don't know. I'm not uh, participating in it myself, but you told us that it is important not to, if you want to go around the rock.
Sorry, Katarina, can you just speak a little bit more to the mic?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
I want to share the wisdom you shared with us in regarding whitewater kayaking. That if you want to go around the rock, don't focus on the rock, but on the path around it. So I think this is applicable to other situations as well.
Yeah, that's the classic mistake that all the beginners, including myself, make in the beginning of kayaking, that you focus on obstacles. And basically, then water brings you to that obstacle by itself. And so if you want to avoid the obstacles, you have to focus on where you want to go. And that's also more broadly, you have to go, you have to have objectives. You have to know what you want to achieve. If you're just dwelling on what is wrong, then you get very negative and frustrated, and it's hard to keep the motivation.
Miha Paušek has two questions. First was, what is your basic scout troop in Ljubljana?
Yeah, it's Črni mrav.
And the second one, does it have sense within the frame of nature protection to put sustainable development into the constitution? And do other matters regarding the law that go along with that? Is there any country that have already done that? That has already done that?
Well, I'm not that qualified in law to say how many countries have done that. Slovenia has some provisions which refer to the right of people to have a healthy environment, which have been sufficient so far, I think, for most of the environmental legislation and for all the legal battles that have been fought. But probably with all the international framework for sustainable development, that's something to be considered. But you have also examples of Montenegro, when they declared independence, they declared themselves as the ecological state, but then didn't really implement that. They still have beautiful nature and quite a lot of good things, but the government policy was more about exploiting nature and doing other things than sustainable development. So as a general principle, yes, it makes sense, but to launch a campaign to change the constitution now in any country, as opposed to doing something more concrete and practical, it's a good question.
Another interesting one from the participants: how to respond calmly, prudently, briefly, and precisely when a client or other stakeholder responds to a recommendation that has some basics with a familiar, that's not possible.
Yeah, that happens quite a lot. In consulting, you learn quite quickly to anticipate this kind of results. And I have also refused work when I knew that the clients would not accept what we would say. in some of the public working for the government in Slovenia and some impact assessment and so on, we had big battles about persuading the client to accept our recommendations. But on the other hand, you have to treat your opposite side with respect, So basically, you also have to understand why they don't think that's possible, and then maybe you find a solution how this is possible. But in some cases, you also have to walk away from them and just, as I said, if there's an obstacle, you should not spend all your energy and time of trying to evangelize them or change their mind. There are many other options to do good work, so you don't need to deal with these kind of people or institutions.
Laura Haberfellner has raised her hand. Please, Laura.
Thank you. I just quickly wanted to add on the discussion of environmental law and to maybe recommend to check out what New Zealand has been done in terms of the Wanganui River and also a forest there. And also other countries have been taking this approach of legal personhood of nature. So I think an important question to ask also regarding the question about constitutional environmental rights is if you grant this to people or if you grant them to nature themselves. So what now mostly is done is to have the human right to access to intact nature, which is often used, for example, to fight against air pollution and things like that. But a very different and kind of new approach, so to say, is this legal personhood of nature itself. So in New Zealand, it has been done to the Wanganui River and the forest. And what they did well, I think, is that they have indigenous people speaking for these natural landscapes as their guardians, kind of, before the law. So I can just, I will share a link to an article and you can have a look if you're interested.
I think it's a very interesting point of view that nature basically has rights or should have rights. But I think the problem is actually this question of where is the boundary between the humans as a species and the wider ecosystem. And as you said, even if you give, the laws and the whole social organization is something which is internal to the humanity. The mountains or the trees or the rivers why would they even know or respect about the human laws? But so then you need basically an advocate inside the society to represent that right. And I think, it's a very interesting discussion, and I think it's totally correct to have the indigenous people representing this interest. And this also, there is a lot of discussion also about ecosystem services versus gifts of nature, where ecosystem services are basically services that some people need and are ready to pay something for that or do something to secure these services. But a lot of the functions of ecosystems are provided to us free of charge or without nature issuing an invoice to us in a way. So but in the end, it always comes to the relationships between people, how we deal with nature. And the problem is that until today, we have been way too aggressive towards other species in ecosystems and so on. And we need to tame our aggression. It's not that nature has to do something.
What do you think? Would it be time for a consultation or public forum for those interested in the vision for the development of nature conservation in Slovenia? Is another question of participants.
That's a very interesting question. In Slovenia, we have this particular situation that we have quite a high level of public awareness about nature, positive attitude towards nature and connection to nature, because we are a very forested and mountainous country, and a lot of people also own some land, own some forest. But on the other hand, we have government institutions who basically think they are the only ones who are responsible for this, and they think they can mainly rule or manage nature conservation through the legal means and through implementation of the EU directives and so on. So there is quite a big miscommunication or lack of communication, lack of cooperation between, let's say, the civil society side of nature conservation and the government side. So definitely it would be good, but I somehow I'm a bit skeptical about the willingness or the benefits of that, or who would be the convening power, let's say, to make a difference and to basically have a more positive vision of nature, not just nature conservation is an obstacle to development, which we always hear from the politicians and from many businesses in Slovenia.
Roland, would you maybe like to ask the question yourself, or should I read it?
You can read it. That would be thank you.
Okay, thank you. Roland Plank has asked you, do you think it is possible to change also the thinking of the modern farmers, believing in the intensification, even with over-fertilizing environmental important surfaces?
Oh, that's another old and more burning question. I think part of the problem in especially in Europe is that we have we have conflicting national or even EU policies. I mean, on one hand, you have the common agricultural policy, whose purpose is to provide food security or increase food production in Europe, and there are a lot of subsidies focusing on that. And on the other hand, you have the nature conservation and the habitat management, and also the organic farming ideas. And I mean, obviously, there is a section of organic farmers in Europe who are doing this work without over-fertilization and so on. But then you have the so-called conventional or the intensive farming, which is destroying basically a lot of the best habitats, of the best soils in Europe. I think it's possible to persuade them, and again, I think the farmers themselves have quite a lot of wisdom in this respect, but it has been basically the last 50, 60, 70 years after the Second World War, all the farmer education, all the farm agriculture extension services were pushing this kind of industrial farming for securing the large quantities of food to be produced, and which was, I think, largely driven also by the food processing industry in Europe, who basically wanted to have the good input and to create the dependency on farmers on the food processing industry. I mean, the big discussion, for example, in Slovenia now is milk. After entering into European Union, basically the country is focused on milk production. So we produce a lot of high quality milk. Most farmers who do milk production are heavily indebted because they invested into excellent equipment. And now the prices of milk are dropping because of the oversupply of milk on European market or other reasons. So I think there is definitely scope for more localized supply chains and different type of farming, but it also what is also very important there is the labor cost or the availability of labor. How many? I mean, can you do more traditional farming, which is more labor intensive, as opposed to heavily mechanized farming we are facing today?
Thank you. We have 5 more questions from participants and 4 more minutes of the webinar. So, another one was, how can people manage to stop the exaggerated progress and the greed of capitalism, which are the causes of world pollution?
Well, I'm not sure I agree with this Marxist-Leninist analysis. I think it's more about this tragedy of the commons and basically some people being allowed to gain benefits by cheating the others or by exploiting the commons. What is the common property? I don't know, the environment, the nature, the atmosphere, and so on. So I think it's more about good regulation than about changing the capitalism with something else, because we know those who lived in communism or socialism, we then thought that we have to replace socialism with capitalism because environmental performance of the rich capitalist countries was better than that of the socialist countries. So I think both systems are not the answer.
Does nature conservation provide employment opportunities for nature conservation technicians?
There is quite a lot of work to be done in nature conservation, but it depends on the governments, on basically also creating the opportunities for, let's say, payment for ecosystem services that either local communities, local people, or protected areas administrations are paid properly for nature conservation, and then they can employ sufficient number of people that can work there.
How to keep financing your work years after years?
You have to charge it properly. You should not see it as a personal sacrifice. You should see it as a profession like any other. And if doctors, lawyers, engineers, I don't know, for a good salary.
Mm-hmm. I think it's important to think outside of some outside of the boxes as well. Going back to the previous question, right? Because nature conservation technicians can do many interesting activities within the field of nature conservation. So I think it's important to be creative as well. Another question: are Slovenians nature lovers?
Yes, of course.
And the last one, which one was the story that stayed more with you in regard of nature protection? And what do you think the biggest accomplishment in Slovenia regarding nature protection was in the last 30 years?
The biggest accomplishment, I said already before, I think, is this declaration of the Natura 2000 network when we entered the EU, where we covered more than 30% of the country, and then this was also later expanded. And we have also shown other European countries that you can have, for example, sustainable forest management at the same time as Natura 2000 designation. So you have a multifunctional forestry. My story, let's say, which stays with me all the time, is maybe this story about the hydropower plant in the Trenta Valley, working with the local people to set up the cooperative, and then how they basically, with the final result being that all the young families which were present in the valley with children in 1991, 92 are still present there, and they are actually doing quite well economically, and it's still a very nicely preserved nature. It's still part of the national park, very attractive tourism destination these days. And they are actively fighting over tourism by themselves.
Real success.
Yeah, I think so.
Is there another question, or because our time is up? I just have a short question regarding this Natura 2000. How would you comment the political climate that helped this achievement, that actually made it possible, that enabled it?
Well, what made it possible was entry of Slovenia into the European Union. This was an obligation. But then I think it was a big achievement on the side of the let's say conservation professionals. I was not part of that team, but people at then this Nature Conservation Administration and all the experts who worked on this, who basically prepared this proposal for designation. And then political climate was not very favorable, because in the last week before designation, the then Minister of Environment, kicked out a number of locations which were interesting for energy development, some river sections for hydropower and some mountains for windmills that energy companies were interested in. And then that led to years and years of conflict of trying to protect those areas. But in summary, it was an achievement, and then it also motivated Croatia when they entered to designate even more than Slovenia, because they have to be better than Slovenia in everything.
Thank you, Jernej, for today's exchange.
Thank you.
Thank you as well. I would like to thank you to all the participants. Wish you. I hope that this exchange motivated you in your work, and hope to see you again somewhere across the Alps.
Okay.